Hello, I'm Ocean Gacy, 34, CEO of a limousine company, but nobody at my sister's husband's family party knew that. They saw me as just the driver, the invisible girl at the curb, the one to fetch, to serve, to be overlooked. Brant laughed, shoved his parents' bags into my hands, even scratched my car on purpose, and they had no idea who I really was. Have you ever felt everyone in your family underestimate you, treat you like you're nothing, while you're quietly holding everything together? How far would you go when the world assumes you're powerless, but you're anything but? The day had begun like any other in suburban Chicago, leaves turning amber and gold, the sharp autumn air brushing against my cheeks as I stepped out of my apartment. I had been juggling back-to-back client calls, contracts to review, and a team that depended on me for every little detail of my limousine company operations. The hum of the city was a constant background score to my life, steady and unrelenting, just like my work ethic. Just as I was about to close my laptop, my phone buzzed insistently. It was Isolde. The text was short, direct. "Can you pick up Brant's parents from the train station? I'm tied up." My heart sank momentarily, not because of the favor itself, but because of what it represented. As the youngest, the so-called helper of the Gacy household, this was routine. Every time Isolde needed a hand, I dropped everything. Despite my own demanding schedule, I typed back, "Of course," with a smile I wouldn't show anyone in person. Family first, always. I changed quickly into casual attire, keeping it understated to avoid any unnecessary attention. My hair was pulled back neatly, and I slipped into a simple coat over a fitted sweater, perfect for the crisp afternoon. Today, unlike usual, I was driving one of my company's limos myself. Normally, my staff would handle pickups, but this time I insisted. Somehow, the thought of navigating this scenario myself, unshielded by a chauffeur uniform, felt like reclaiming a fraction of control over the inevitable humiliation. As I drove through the familiar streets, memories of my childhood bubbled unbidden to the surface. Isolde, the family's golden girl, always in the spotlight. Me, Ocean, the problem solver, the invisible backbone, the fixer. Even now, years later, these dynamics had barely shifted. I reminded myself quietly, it's just a ride. Be invisible. Do your part. I clenched the steering wheel, forcing the simmering resentment deep inside where no one could see it. By the time I reached the train station, a small crowd milled about, passengers greeting friends and family, dragging luggage behind them. Brant's parents appeared, elegant and poised, their presence immediately commanding attention. Before I could even step out, Brant himself emerged, confident and seemingly unbothered by the late hour. "Oh, our driver is here," he exclaimed, beaming as if the world owed him a spotlight. "I told you this service was great." His words were casual, but the tone carried a sharp edge of condescension. He thrust their bags into my hands and, without a pause, handed me a crumpled $5 bill. "For your time," he said, smiling in a way that was meant to belittle. I froze. The metallic scent of the car interior mingled with the crisp autumn air, and my pulse quickened slightly, not out of fear, but disbelief. He didn't know. He had no idea that the woman he assumed to be just a driver owned the fleet he praised. My fingers tightened on the leather handle of his parents' suitcase, and I felt a surge of both indignation and suppressed satisfaction. I didn't say a word. Not then. Not yet. We drove in silence. Brant's parents discussed their upcoming plans for a weekend retreat, vacation homes, and luxury trips, oblivious to the reality of the driver at the wheel. Every mention of wealth, status, and lifestyle felt like a personal slight, a reminder of how differently the world saw me. "Miss Chauffeur," they referred to me, light and airy, as though I were a ghost filling a functional role. My knuckles whitened around the steering wheel. I listened, noting every word, storing each tiny slight and misjudgment. I recalled the countless family gatherings where I'd been overshadowed, my contributions invisible, my voice unheard. I let the memories sit alongside the anger, blending into a quiet determination. The estate-like venue came into view. Brant opened the car door for his parents with exaggerated courtesy, guiding them toward the grand entrance as if I were a ghost once more. Isolde waved faintly from a balcony above, mouthing a perfunctory thanks that did nothing to ease the sting. I glanced into the rearview mirror. My eyes glimmered with unshed tears, but my face remained carefully neutral, a mask of composure. I exhaled slowly, letting the chill of the evening settle over me. I was the invisible one again, I thought, the internal voice almost a whisper against the backdrop of the evening chatter. But not for long. I stepped out of the car, closing the door with precision, letting the faint click echo slightly against the marble driveway. The sound seemed to punctuate my resolve. Inside, I could hear faint laughter, the clink of silverware, the gentle murmur of well-dressed guests mingling. The space that had welcomed them now felt alien, unwelcoming, and yet I sensed the threads of opportunity weaving themselves quietly around me. As I retrieved the final piece of luggage, my mind raced through possibilities. This moment, small as it seemed, could become a turning point. Every slight, every misunderstanding, every favor extracted under the guise of family duty. It was all data, all ammunition for what would come. Patience had always been my ally, and tonight it whispered that the long game was about to begin. The autumn air turned colder as I started the engine again. My reflection in the rearview mirror caught my attention, and I studied my own face. Strong, composed, unreadable. They didn't know who they were dealing with, and yet they would find out, soon. The limo glided along the winding drive, leaves crunching under tires as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawns. I felt the familiar tension coil and release inside me, the quiet pulse of suppressed power that only those underestimated could recognize. Today, I was the invisible one. But every underestimation carries a price. But not for long. The cool autumn air brushing against my face as I closed the limo door faded behind me, replaced by the hum of laughter, clinking glassware, and the unmistakable scent of rich cuisine wafting from the mansion. I followed Isolde's polite insistence, heels clicking against the marble, each step a reminder that my presence was tolerated at best, noticed at worst. My hands were steady, but the quiet tension coiled in my chest like a spring, ready to snap if provoked. "You're already here. Come in for dinner." Isolde's voice rang lightly, yet carried an unspoken pressure. Her hand briefly brushed my arm, a gesture that in any other context could be considered friendly. Tonight, it felt like a tether I couldn't ignore. I hesitated, taking a slow breath. "I shouldn't," I began, but she cut me off with that familiar, insistent tone. "It'll be weird if you don't." They already saw you. The implication was clear. Leave now, and I'd look awkward. Stay, and I'd be invisible, again. With a resigned nod, I let her guide me through the grand entrance. The dining room was a spectacle of wealth and precision. Candlelight flickered across polished silverware, crystal glasses lined up in meticulous order. The scent of roasted meats and fresh herbs mingled in the air, luxurious and overwhelming. Guests murmured greetings, their laughter measured, clipped. I scanned the table, noting the seating arrangement. At the far end, among cousins and staff members, the space subtly designated as not quite family. Brant arrived a few moments later, drink in hand, already half drunk and half smug, his posture radiating self-assurance. He scanned the room and landed on me, his lips curling into a grin that did not reach his eyes. "Cheers to family," he announced, raising his glass with deliberate theatrics. Then, turning toward me, he added casually, "And especially to Ocean here, our trusty driver." A silence fell over the table. Some chuckled awkwardly, others glanced at their plates, uncomfortable with the overt humiliation. My fork hovered midair, my thoughts spiraled. This man sees me as furniture. I forced a controlled breath, suppressing the flash of indignation. My composure had always been my armor. Speak, and I risk chaos. Silence, and I collect ammunition for later. I chose the latter. Isolde, for her part, said nothing. Engrossed in recounting their honeymoon experiences to a cousin, she offered no defense. I caught her eye fleetingly, and she looked away. Her politeness was measured, calculated. It spoke volumes about where her loyalties lay. I allowed a faint smile to touch my lips, internal and private. Power is not always in the speaking, I reminded myself. Often, It is in the quiet observation. The meal progressed in a tense rhythm, laughter and conversation washing over me like a current I could not control. I noticed the subtle glances exchanged among guests whenever I lifted a utensil or poured myself water. Each one was a reminder of my underestimated status, a test of patience I had grown accustomed to over the years. Yet beneath the surface, a storm brewed, silent and deliberate. When the dinner concluded, the guests filed out, admiring the limo parked outside. Brant sauntered next to me, casual but deliberate. He leaned against the car to adjust something, and the sharp screech of metal against polished paint split the evening air. I froze, eyes narrowing as I glanced at the deep scratch running along the side. Brant's laugh was soft but mocking. "Hope that comes off," he said, tone light. "Not my problem, though. Just a car, right?" I placed a hand on the mark, feeling the depth of it beneath my fingertips. My mind raced, not with anger alone, but with clarity. Every inch of this scratch, every insult, each condescending remark from earlier tonight was recorded meticulously in memory, as precise and detailed as a blueprint. I didn't react. Not yet. Let him swagger back inside, thinking he'd won the evening. My victory, after all, required timing and foresight, not rash emotion. Reaching into the glove compartment, my fingers found the small black voice recorder. I pressed on, the soft red light confirming its readiness. It was not vengeance yet. It was preparation. Tonight had been a performance, a rehearsal of patience, and the real act would come later. The quiet power of observation had always been my advantage, and tonight would be no exception. The night air had thickened as I closed the car door behind me. Leaves scattered across the driveway in small, rustling bursts, mirroring the chaotic undercurrent of my thoughts. Every slight from Brant and the passive complicity of Isolde would not be forgotten. I was no longer invisible, merely underestimated. And underestimated people, if they are strategic enough, hold immense power. I stepped back, straightened my posture, and let the cool air fill my lungs. The mansion lights glimmered behind me, a perfect stage for the family's oblivious arrogance. I could see the future clearly now. Every insult, every scratch, every belittling glance, they were not just offenses, they were threads in a web I was weaving, and soon enough, the weave would tighten around those who dared to underestimate me. I can't play his game in front of his crowd. That thought echoed as I stepped out of the crisp evening air and into my quiet apartment near downtown Chicago the next morning. The city was just waking up, traffic humming faintly in the distance, and the smell of roasted coffee beans drifting from the corner cafe below. It should have been peaceful, a reprieve from the humiliating evening, but the memory of Brant's laughter and the scratch on my limo gnawed at the edges of my composure. Before I could settle, there was a soft knock at the door. My parents, in their usual well-meaning but subtly dismissive fashion, had stopped by to thank me for the favor, unaware of how hollow their gesture would feel. My mother, always precise in her smiles, held an envelope delicately between her fingers, while my father nodded with the calm assurance of someone who believed he had fulfilled his duty. "You're always dependable," he said, the words warm on the surface but cold underneath. I opened the door and took the envelope, a tight knot forming in my stomach. Inside was $20. For gas, they said. $20 for hours behind the wheel, navigating traffic and their expectations, while my company's profits, my credentials, my intellect, went unacknowledged. I stayed silent, nodding politely, and watched them leave, the envelope heavy in my hand, heavier than it should have been. Sitting at my kitchen table afterward, I stared at the plain paper envelope, thinking back to a day I had tried to forget. My 10th birthday, the memories slicing through me with unrelenting precision. I was helping my dad build a shed, hammer in hand, focused, determined. My sister Isolde had been inside, dressed neatly for piano class, her presence celebrated and admired. "Good with your hands," my father had said, laughing at my efforts. "Not like your sister, she's the smart one." The words weren't cruel in his eyes, but they cemented a reality I carried for decades. That day, I stopped asking to join the math club, stopped raising my hand in class, stopped asserting myself in ways that might make me visible. I became just the hands, while the intellect, the strategist, the real power was assigned elsewhere. The echo of those words haunted me as I paced my living room, glancing at the framed degrees on the wall, MIT certificate, business awards. Nothing mattered to them. Not my late nights negotiating contracts, not the fleet of limousines under my care, not the recognition I earned in the world outside their narrow perspective. My identity had been quietly, relentlessly defined for me, the helper, the driver, the invisible participant in my own life. I moved to the bathroom mirror, the reflection showing the tension in my jaw, the resolve in my eyes. "This is not all I am," I whispered, voice barely audible, yet carrying the weight of conviction. I smoothed my hair back, straightened my shoulders, and opened my phone, scrolling through the dashboards of my company. The numbers were solid, reassuring. My business thrived because of my mind, my strategy, my drive, not because of anyone's perception. A ping from my inbox startled me. An email subject line glared back. "We're sorry to cancel the luxury fleet booking due to recent online misrepresentation." My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Screenshots from social media littered the message, showing attendees from last night's dinner, referring to me as chauffeur girl. A wave of cold realization washed over me. My silence hadn't protected me. It hadn't concealed my accomplishments. It had erased me entirely in the eyes of the very people I thought I could tolerate. Sitting down, I replayed every detail of the prior evening, Brant's mocking tone, the shallow laugh of distant relatives, Isolde's polite avoidance, the scratch in the limo. The humiliation intertwined with old wounds, stretching back to my father's shed and the unacknowledged brilliance of my youth. Each memory sharpened my focus, clarifying a plan that had been forming quietly, meticulously, beneath years of apparent submission. I pressed record on my voice recorder, narrating the events, detailing the insults, the scratches, the unearned assumptions. I cataloged every slight, every dismissive glance, every condescending word. This wasn't just about retribution. It was about reclaiming my visibility, my worth, my identity. And I would do it not with shouted accusations, but with undeniable evidence, a strategic unveiling of truth. I looked around my apartment, the quiet chaos of my life arranged precisely, as though waiting for me to act. The framed certificates, the awards, the models of my fleet, silent witnesses to my competence, ignored by my family, yet fully mine. This was my foundation, my fortress, my leverage. The past would no longer dictate the limits of my present. By mid-morning, I had drafted a mental blueprint. Social media evidence, careful documentation of the scratched limo, corroborating details from staff and eyewitnesses. Each step measured, deliberate. Every insult from last night would be contextualized, exposed, and addressed on my own terms. The simmering anger transformed into strategic determination. I glanced at the envelope on the kitchen counter again, $20 mocking the effort it had taken to drive Brant's parents. I smiled faintly. Even their token acknowledgement was fuel, a reminder of how little they understood me and how much I could reveal with calculated precision. The city outside my window moved on, unaware of the reckoning forming in this apartment. I stood, pacing with purpose now, feeling the threads of strategy and justice intertwine. My silence had been my shield, but it would soon be my sword. And when the time came, everyone who had dismissed me would see what it meant to underestimate Ocean Gacy. My silence isn't protecting me, it's erasing me. That thought lingered as I booted up my laptop the following morning, the soft hum of the downtown Chicago office filtering through the apartment window. The city outside was awake, sunlight glinting off the high-rises, but inside, my world had already tilted. Hundreds of notifications pinged across my screen, and my stomach dropped in familiar dread. I clicked the first alert, a Facebook post from Brant's cousin. The caption read, "Thanks to our awesome family chauffeur, Ocean, for the ride." Tagged right there was me, smiling politely as I held the door for his parents. Comments poured in almost instantly. "So cute that they keep it in the family." "Is she single, though? Does she have a side hustle?" The laughter, the disbelief, the subtle humiliation, it all hit at once, like a cold slap to the face. My pulse quickened. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, the betrayal gnawing at me. Brant wasn't even present, yet his arrogance radiated through every shared image, every tag, every snide comment. My entire professional reputation, the one I had carefully built, hour by hour, mile by mile, was being dismantled by a single digital post. It was as if my credentials, my achievements, my intellect were invisible once again, replaced by a mockery of my own image. The phone rang sharply. It was my PR team, their voices tight, urgent. "We have a situation, Ocean," one said. 2 contracts were paused. 1 major deal canceled outright. The client's words stung. "Your personal image doesn't reflect executive-level service." I could almost hear Brant's laughter echoing in my mind. The irony wasn't lost on me. My silence had been weaponized against me, yet again. I ended the call and paced through my apartment, each step heavy, deliberate. The rage I had kept simmering, careful and measured, now threatened to spill over. I needed a space to vent, a place where no one could judge the storm inside me. Within the hour, I had booked a private rage room downtown. It was surreal, almost comical, the way you could pay to destroy replicas of your daily frustrations. Goggles on, bat in hand, I stepped in. A broken monitor labeled Family Loyalty waited for me. I swung once, twice, the screen shattering into 1,000 pieces. I hit a mannequin tagged with Brant's name, the impact reverberating through my chest. Each swing expelled years of suppressed fury. Finally, I took aim at a glass plate with my own face sketched on it, the shards scattering like fragments of my invisibility, my erasure, my silent endurance. Tears mingled with anger, cathartic and raw. By late morning, I returned to my office, clothes dusted with fragments of glass, heart pounding, but mind sharper than ever. My employees watched me warily as I called a meeting. The room fell silent. "From now on, we rebuild brand integrity," I announced, voice steady, authoritative. Miles, my head of operations, leaned in and whispered, "Want me to leak the real story?" I shook my head slowly. Not yet. Patience was my ally. Everything needed to be documented. Every insult, every slur, every underhanded move. I spent the next hours meticulously organizing screenshots, video clips from last night's dinner, and audio recordings. One clip stood out, Brant saying plainly, "She's just the driver." My blood boiled, but my approach was deliberate. I would not react rashly. This was about precision. My silence was no longer erasure. It was a shield, a scalpel, a means to carve truth into the public eye. The irony wasn't lost on me. A $20 envelope from my parents, meant as a token for gas money, contrasted sharply with the wealth of attention my family now drew to my subordinate role. The public perception of me had become a weapon, turned against the very foundation I had built with intellect and strategy. I realized then that reclaiming my narrative would require more than anger. It would demand clarity, timing, and an unyielding sense of control. Hours passed in deliberate work. I crafted statements, prepared presentations of evidence, and scheduled private briefings with my top clients. Every moment was a calculated step toward re-establishing authority. The weight of humiliation transformed into focused resolve. I would take back what had been misrepresented, exposing Brant's arrogance and the implicit complicity of those around him. By evening, I stood by my office window, gazing at the skyline. Lights flickered in neighboring buildings, reflections dancing on glass panes, mirroring the sparks of strategy forming in my mind. The viral post had set the stage, but it would not dictate the outcome. My visibility was mine to control, my narrative mine to reclaim. And when the world finally saw the truth, it would not be through anger or retaliation. It would be through undeniable proof of competence and dignity. I closed my laptop, deep breath steadying my heart. A quiet determination settled in my chest. The game had shifted. Brant and those who doubted me were no longer in control. My silence had evolved into preparation, my restraint into strategy. Tomorrow, I would begin the calculated dismantling of misrepresentation, brick by brick, with precision and poise. The morning light filtered softly through the blinds, casting a warm but fragile glow across my apartment. I sat at the corner of my desk, staring at the last clip I had just reviewed from Brant's dinner antics. The edges of the frame caught the candlelight from the event, the laughter, the casual cruelty of someone convinced he had all the power. My pulse, though steady, hummed beneath my skin with a coiled intensity. Today, I would stop being the passive observer of my own life. Silence, until now, had been my shield, but it was about to become my weapon. I unlocked the password-protected folder I had labeled Brant Evidence. Each file was meticulously organized: verbal insults, public humiliation moments, defamation instances, and subtle slights caught on camera. I pressed play on one labeled Verbal Insults 2. Brant's voice echoed through the apartment. "I mean, look at her. She's always been the help." His words didn't sting the way they used to. Anger, yes, but a disciplined, cold kind. I listened, absorbed, cataloged every detail. Each insult was now ammunition. My phone buzzed softly. A message from Isolde. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen, then decided to call her. Not confront, not plead, just a conversation. The line clicked. "Why are you making this a thing?" her voice asked, casual, rehearsed, distant. I could hear the faint clinking of glass as she fussed with wine glasses, preparing for some gala event that mattered more to her than the humiliation unfolding in our family. "He's damaging me, Isolde. You know that, right?" I asked, measured. "He's my husband. Don't ask me to choose," she replied without inflection. I drew in a slow breath. "You already did," I said, my voice steady, almost eerie in its calmness. There was no more room for negotiation. I hung up, expression unreadable, and left her apartment. The city hummed indifferently around me, but inside, I felt a clarity I hadn't experienced in years. The betrayal was mine alone to respond to, and respond I would. Back in my office storage room, Miles had already begun securing archived footage from every event, every function where Brant's arrogance had been caught on camera. "He's poking into your records," Miles said quietly. "I saw a request for your client list come in." "Let him," I said, eyes narrowing. "The more he digs, the deeper he falls. Let's see how his arrogance betrays him." The hours passed in deliberate preparation. I sorted through recordings, voice memos, screenshots from social media, carefully, meticulously. My apartment felt like a command center, the quiet buzz of my computer, the only sound accompanying the steady beat of strategy forming in my mind. Each insult, each slight, each dismissive glance from Brant and, painfully, from my own sister, had been cataloged. My silence was no longer passive. It was calibrated, precise, and potent. Evening crept in, painting the city skyline with streaks of gold and crimson. The dim light filtered through my office windows, illuminating the outlines of every file, every screen, every meticulously documented slight. I paused to breathe, staring out at the city, letting the weight of my isolation settle. Loneliness gnawed at me, sure, but it was a disciplined loneliness, one that sharpened focus and hardened resolve. I wasn't looking for allies from those who had already chosen Brant over me. My ally was preparation, patience, and the certainty that the truth, when revealed, would speak louder than any plea or argument. I declined a journalist's probing inquiry, keeping all my moves under wraps. Instead, I crafted an anonymous tip, subtly referencing Brant's questionable business dealings and online manipulations. The message was careful, cryptic, enough to nudge curiosity and initiate a chain reaction without exposing myself prematurely. Let the house of cards topple on its own. I would not rush. I needed every element in place before revealing the final picture. Hours later, the apartment was quiet. The screens displayed evidence side by side: video clips, screenshots, audio files. My hand hovered over the phone, crafting a single, concise message. "You only get one warning. Continue, and next time, I won't just drive." A pause, a breath, then send. Seen. No reply. I smiled faintly, a cold satisfaction washing over me. No theatrics, no shouting, just calculated, quiet assertion. My silence had been weaponized, transforming from a source of erasure into a source of power. I moved through the apartment, checking each folder, each video, each label. The adrenaline mingled with resolve. Brant's arrogance had underestimated me, as did my sister's complacency. But misjudgment, in this case, would carry consequences they were unprepared to endure. Every file, every recording, every careful note built toward a future where truth would prevail. And I would be the one dictating the pace and the impact. As night fully descended over Chicago, the city lights flickered in the distance, distant yet promising, reflecting off the glass of the high-rises like shards of clarity. I leaned back in my chair, letting the exhaustion of focused preparation wash over me. My eyes fell on a framed photo of my younger self, the one who had always been the helper, always the overlooked child. Ocean had changed. Silence was no longer surrender. Silence was strategy. I powered down the monitors, leaving the evidence organized, secure, and ready. The room was dim, shadows stretching across the walls. The quiet determination within me settled like a living thing, coiled and ready to spring. Tomorrow would be about execution, about precision, about reclaiming my narrative. For the first time, my anger and solitude felt purposeful rather than punitive. I had turned the tools of erasure into instruments of revelation. The morning after sending my warning to Brant, the air in my apartment felt unusually thick, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I'd gone to bed late, meticulously reviewing the clips one last time, ensuring every insult, every casual dismissal was recorded and cataloged. The city outside moved along its own rhythm, indifferent to the tension that had settled over my world. Yet inside, I felt an unusual kind of calm, a quiet before the storm. By mid-morning, I was dressed simply, avoiding anything that might draw attention. The marina wasn't far from my apartment, just a 30-minute drive along Lakeshore Drive. My yacht, the quiet one, had been docked there for months, quietly waiting for me to assert my presence. I parked at the edge of the marina, glancing at the glimmer of autumn sunlight bouncing off the water. Sailboats bobbed gently, yachts gleaming like polished ivory, and the faint smell of lake water mixed with the aroma of espresso from the cafe nearby. I adjusted my jacket and walked along the dock, nodding briefly at the workers who recognized me, their respect evident in subtle smiles and small nods. They had no idea how long I'd been building this presence, quietly asserting myself behind the scenes. As I approached the quiet one, the sense of observation sharpened. I could see Brant a few docks over, charming the small crowd gathered by the water's edge. The crowd's laughter floated across the marina, and I could hear the faint clinking of glasses and soft chatter. He was performing, as always, assuming the spotlight was solely his. He didn't see me yet, and that was perfect. For once, the advantage was mine. I told myself, let them think I'm here to clean the deck. Let them underestimate me one last time. Brant's voice carried over the water. Some of us work hard for this kind of success. Others drive cars for a living, he said, pointing directly at me with a grin that was meant to mock, to belittle, and to amuse. Some people chuckled. Others pulled out their phones. Cameras whirred. In the corner of my eye, I noticed a teenage girl holding her phone, recording the entire interaction, oblivious to the storm she had just captured. The words hung in the air, a deliberate strike at my reputation, assuming I would remain silent. I didn't move. I didn't react. My expression was neutral, calm, but inside, a fire began to ignite. Years of being dismissed, overlooked, labeled just the helper, came rushing back. And yet this time, the balance of power was about to shift. I watched the video being recorded, felt its weight. This was a moment that could change everything, not just in the marina, not just with Brant, but publicly, irreversibly. I stepped closer to my staff, my voice quiet but firm. Prepare the guest list. I want to cross-check everything later. They nodded without question, moving efficiently. Every detail mattered now. Every name, every role. I wasn't just reacting, I was planning. I took a measured step onto the deck of the quiet one, turning slowly to glance back at Brant. My gaze met his, unwavering. I spoke, just loud enough for him and anyone nearby to hear. Next time, don't lean on things you can't afford. The words were calm, neutral on the surface, but underneath was a layer of intent that would be felt long after the laughter faded. The girl's live stream had already begun spreading, captions appearing in real time. "Is this guy serious? She literally owns that yacht." The clip's reach started small, then snowballed. Views climbed, notifications pinged on my phone. I stepped back, letting the video circulate, watching as the truth began to leak into the public sphere. Brant's confidence faltered slightly, though he tried to mask it with a self-conscious chuckle. The momentum had shifted, quietly, effectively. As the afternoon waned, the autumn sun casting long shadows across the dock, I watched my assistant's messages light up my phone. "You're trending," one read. My eyes narrowed as I opened the notification, scanning the viral clip. Comments poured in, people expressing astonishment, support, even a touch of outrage. "The boss stayed quiet, until she didn't," one top comment read, perfectly encapsulating the subtle power shift I had engineered. I allowed a small, satisfied smile to cross my face. The silence I had maintained, the patience I had cultivated, had transformed into a quiet force of revelation. I wasn't just the observer anymore. I was the orchestrator, and the narrative was finally shifting in my favor. Each view, each share, each stunned reaction reinforced the truth. Brant's arrogance had been recorded, his assumptions exposed, and the world was beginning to see the real me, not the driver he so flippantly mocked. As the crowd began to disperse, I remained on deck, surveying the marina, the reflection of golden sunlight glinting off the yachts, and the ripple of water moving gently beneath. The evidence was now in the hands of the public, untouchable, unfiltered. Brant had assumed the upper hand, but in reality, his every word had been captured, documented, immortalized. I let the calm of evening settle over me, confident, collected. Tonight, the world knew what I had always known. Power is not always loud, and silence, when wielded with precision, could echo louder than any insult. The tables had turned, subtly but unmistakably, and tomorrow, the next move would be mine. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of my downtown office, slicing across stacks of files and scattered notes like rays of judgment. My phone buzzed incessantly on the glass desk, notifications piling up from lawyers, colleagues, and news outlets. Each ping felt heavier than the last, a reminder that the world outside was now fully awake to the story I had quietly been building for months. I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the bitter warmth ground me as I reviewed the folder labeled Exhibit A to H. Every clip, every photo, every screenshot of Brant's condescending remarks had been meticulously cataloged. My hands trembled for a fraction of a second before settling into controlled determination. Today, the silence ends. The drive to the courthouse was deliberately unhurried. I needed to feel every intersection, every turn, every stoplight, as though I were imprinting the city into my memory, claiming it as mine. Downtown Chicago glimmered with the chill of early autumn, pedestrians bundled in scarves, cars honking impatiently. From the corner of my eye, I saw reflections of the skyline bouncing off the glass facades, reminding me of the power structures I was about to confront head-on. Brant had assumed his words could humiliate me without consequence, but now I was turning his arrogance into a weapon. My yacht, my fleet, my years of quiet strategy, all were irrelevant if the law could not formalize the truth. Today it would. At the law firm, my attorney, a seasoned woman with sharp eyes and a quiet presence, looked up from her laptop as I entered. "Are you ready?" she asked, gesturing toward the folder. "I'm ready," I said, my voice low but steady. "I want this public, every detail, every insult, every scratch on that car." I slid the folder across the polished wood, careful to make a deliberate show of it. The evidence would speak louder than any words I could muster. Receipts for repairs, videos of Brant's mockery, social media screenshots, all assembled into a case that left no room for doubt. The lawyer nodded. "This is airtight," she confirmed, tapping the folder. I allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile to cross my face. The groundwork had been laid, and now it was time to reap the results. Later that afternoon, I posted a statement on LinkedIn. I kept it concise, clear, and purposeful. To anyone who thought I was just the driver, I was, and the CEO, and the owner, and now the plaintiff. The post went live, and within minutes, notifications began to flood my feed. Likes, comments, shares, news outlets picked up the story almost instantly. The narrative I had so carefully controlled in private was now echoing publicly. Brant's smug confidence seemed a lifetime ago. The world now saw him for the reckless, dismissive figure he had always been. I requested a brief meeting with Isolde at a quiet cafe near Michigan Avenue. She arrived, impeccably dressed, hair perfectly styled, smile practiced. I slid into the booth across from her, placing a folder on the table, though it contained nothing but a symbolic gesture. "I don't need you to fight him," I said quietly. "Just tell the truth." Isolde's smile faltered for the briefest moment before she reassembled it. "It's not my business to interfere in my husband's world," she replied evenly, eyes flicking away toward the cafe's entrance. The words were precise, rehearsed, yet they cut deeper than any insult Brant had ever thrown my way. I exhaled slowly. "Then stay in his world. You've made your choice." I rose to leave, my expression controlled, but as the door swung behind me, a single tear betrayed the calm I projected. The next few days were a whirlwind of media attention. Brant attempted to recover some semblance of control, giving an interview that painted me as dramatic, insinuating that my lawsuit was an attempt at relevance rather than justice. His lawyer leaked my childhood photos to tabloids, trying to undermine my credibility. I saw them while waiting in line at the grocery store. Photos of a younger me, the helper, the observer, the one always overlooked. My chest tightened, but I let it pass. Every attack only reinforced my resolve. Finally, the court date arrived. My assistant handed me the official paperwork, the date circled in red ink, a symbol of the reckoning that was about to unfold. I folded the paper carefully, as if tucking away all the years of dismissal, the casual insults, and the moments where my family had ignored my worth. Whispering to myself, I said, "I'll see you in court." The words were steady, firm, and infused with the certainty that comes from long-prepared resolve. The courthouse steps loomed large as I arrived, photographers snapping photos, reporters murmuring questions I neither answered nor acknowledged. The crowd sensed the tension, the significance of the event. I could feel Brant's gaze somewhere beyond the front doors, though I did not need to see him to know he was there, bracing for the challenge he had underestimated. My lawyer flanked me, a quiet pillar of support as we moved inside. This wasn't just about vindication. It was about reclaiming my dignity, asserting the truth, and holding those who had underestimated me accountable. Inside the courtroom, every detail mattered. The angle of the lighting, the placement of exhibits, the order of witnesses. My evidence was precise, every clip meticulously edited, every document chronologically organized. Brant would have no excuses. His words and actions would speak for themselves. As I took my seat, I allowed myself a brief moment to reflect on the journey that had brought me here. From the humiliating family dinner, to viral videos, to the silent strategizing, and now to the tangible power of legal authority. The tension was palpable, a charged silence that hung in the air like static electricity. I could feel the courtroom absorbing the history, the personal stakes, and the public significance of the case. For years, I had been dismissed, overlooked, and misrepresented, but today, I was more than the sum of those injustices. Today, I was Ocean Gacy, the strategist, the CEO, the plaintiff, and finally, the one whose voice would no longer be silenced. The gavel struck in the morning session, and my heart thumped, not in fear, but in anticipation. This was not the end. It was the beginning of the moment where all of the quiet years, all the careful planning, all the patience would finally converge. Brant's arrogance, Isolde's silence, the public scrutiny. They were all part of a story that would no longer hide in the shadows. The morning air outside Cook County Courthouse carried a crispness that seemed to sharpen the anticipation around me. I stepped out of the sleek black sedan, the leather of my navy suit feeling reassuring against my skin, as though each stitch had been sewn with purpose and resolve. Reporters' cameras clicked and whirred, flashes reflecting off the polished courthouse steps, but I didn't flinch. Every step toward the grand entrance was deliberate, a declaration. This was no longer about quiet endurance. This was the stage I had been preparing for all my life. The past humiliations, the whispered jabs, the dismissive smiles, they were all about to meet their reckoning. Inside, the courthouse buzzed with hushed murmurs. People recognized me now, not as the invisible sister, not as a driver, but as Ocean Gacy, the CEO, the woman who had orchestrated every careful step leading to this day. My lawyer guided me to my seat, a folder of meticulously organized evidence clutched firmly in my hands. Brant was already seated on the opposite side, adjusting his tie, his smug smile faltering just slightly as he noticed the media attention and the composed presence I exuded. I caught Isolde's eye across the room. Her silence was a dagger, sharpened and deliberate, yet today it would not sway me. Today, truth would speak louder than familial loyalty or betrayal. The proceedings began with opening arguments. Brant's attorney attempted to paint me as petty, vindictive, someone inflamed by old grievances, but I remained impassive, a calm island in a storm of accusations. My lawyer's voice cut through smoothly, clear and commanding. "We are not here for feelings," she said. "We are here for facts, and the facts are irrefutable." My pulse remained steady as she presented the clips and photos, each meticulously catalogued, each telling the story I had lived. The yacht video, the limousine scratch, the countless moments where my presence had been minimized or mocked. The courtroom absorbed it all, every eye flicking between the screen and Brant's increasingly anxious expression. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. The footage dropped. The audio and video synced perfectly, playing the scene from the family dinner, my hands on the limousine door as Brant sneered, "She's just the driver." The courtroom reacted almost audibly. Murmurs rippled through the spectators. The next clip showed him leaning against the car, deliberately scratching the paint while laughing. Even Brant's lawyer could not hide the sharp intake of breath. Every smirk, every condescending word was captured, immutable, undeniable. My internal monologue was quiet but firm. Finally, the world sees. Finally, it is public. Brant was called to the stand. I watched him struggle as pointed questions chipped away at his facade. "Are you aware that Ocean owns the limousine company?" the attorney asked calmly. Brant's attempt at nonchalance wavered. I thought she was a contractor," he mumbled. I kept my expression neutral, letting the courtroom bear witness to the unraveling of his carefully constructed arrogance. My own calm became a weapon, an unspoken assertion of authority and presence. Then the climactic moment arrived. I stood to make my statement. The room held its collective breath. "This wasn't about pride," I began, my voice firm but laced with the tremor of long-restrained emotion. "It was about being erased by people who knew better." I glanced briefly at the rows of onlookers, at Brant and Isolde, and then straight into the gallery of spectators who had followed the story online and in print. I am not here for revenge. I am here to make sure no other driver stays silent. No one should be diminished for their worth, their effort, or their existence. The words landed, echoing softly against the high ceilings, carrying the weight of years of invisibility and neglect. Silence enveloped the room for a heartbeat before the murmurs began. Respectful, acknowledging, the first real recognition of the justice being served. Brant's composure had cracked entirely. His hands fidgeted with the chair arms, eyes darting around. Isolde's face betrayed guilt, a fleeting shadow passing across her otherwise controlled expression. She remained silent, but her silence now spoke volumes. I allowed the moment to settle, savoring the clarity and the justice of exposure, knowing that each carefully laid piece of evidence had struck true. As the day progressed, witnesses recounted the documented insults, the public mockery, and the deliberate property damage. Each testimony built the case like a crescendo, a narrative of control, disrespect, and belittlement brought into full view. Every witness, employees, event guests, even the teenage girl who had filmed the viral clip, added weight to the truth. The judge's attention was unwavering, and I felt the power shift with each revelation, a tangible momentum that pulsed through the room. The world no longer believed the narrative Brandt had cultivated in his arrogance. It was mine now, fully and undeniably. By the afternoon, the climax of the trial approached. The judge addressed the court, reminding everyone of the seriousness and the weight of the proceedings. Brandt's defense wavered. His public mask cracked under the weight of verified evidence. My heart remained steady, my mind focused. I had rehearsed this journey countless times in my private moments, walking the courtroom steps mentally, adjusting every gesture, every word. And now, in reality, I was unflinching, commanding respect simply by occupying my space with intention. The final moments of the day saw my lawyer summarizing the evidence, tying every insult, every scratch, and every dismissive gesture into a cohesive story of defamation and harm. My internal voice whispered, "This is why I stayed quiet until now. This is why every small step, every strategic silence, every piece of collected evidence mattered." I felt a deep, resonant satisfaction, not triumph in cruelty, but in justice, in the reclamation of identity. I stepped out of the courthouse later that afternoon, the sun dipping low over Chicago's skyline, bathing the streets in a soft amber glow. Reporters clamored, but I gave a measured statement. Truth has a way of reaching the surface, eventually. Let's hope this reminds us all to see the worth in everyone. No fanfare, no unnecessary dramatics, just presence and the weight of authority earned. For the first time in years, I felt the true power of being recognized for who I am, not the role assigned to me by others. Isolde followed silently, a reminder of what loyalty and betrayal could mean, but her inaction no longer had power over me. Brandt had been exposed, but it was not vengeance. It was a demonstration of the respect and recognition I had long been denied. The courthouse steps, now emptying, echoed with the quiet gravity of accountability. I allowed myself a moment, a breath deep and unhurried, absorbing the journey, the fight, and the vindication. Justice, patience, and clarity had collided here today, and though the emotional wounds would take time to heal fully, the truth had finally been illuminated for all to see. The stage had been set, the performance complete, and the audience, both public and personal, had witnessed the final act. The morning sun filtered through the tall office windows, casting long, quiet shadows across my desk. The verdict had come in days ago, yet the weight of the moment lingered with a subtle, almost tangible hum. I sipped my coffee slowly, savoring the warmth as if it could fortify the calm I now carried. Every email notification, every message of congratulations reminded me that the court's decision wasn't just a legal win, it was a reclamation of my life, my dignity, and my story. Brandt would pay for the damage, both tangible and symbolic. His public apologies and the mandated compensation reflected the recognition I had been denied for far too long. The courtroom victory had provided a sort of closure, yet it was bittersweet. My sister Isolde had remained absent throughout the entire ordeal. Her silence was deafening, a permanent fracture in the relationship that had once been my anchor. I had left the courthouse steps that day, knowing full well that reconciliation was unlikely. The absence of her support had taught me a harsh lesson about loyalty, love, and the cost of prioritizing appearances over truth. Yet I was no longer searching for her validation. The recognition I had earned was my own. By midday, I returned to my office to begin the practical work of reintegration. My team had been patient, understanding that the public ordeal demanded strategic pacing before the company could fully resume normal operations. I checked in on ongoing projects, responding with clarity and precision. Every decision was informed by lessons learned during the weeks of intense scrutiny. The $20,000 settlement from the limo incident was secured, but it was the reinstatement of professional respect, the clearing of my reputation, that truly mattered. I drafted a brief public statement and scheduled a press release. No title is beneath you, unless you choose to stay beneath it. The phrasing felt deliberate, a mantra for anyone who had ever been underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed. Later that afternoon, I decided to confront the lingering emotional threads that the court could not mend. I drove to Isolde's house, the streets of Oak Brook bathed in a soft golden light that hinted at autumn's retreat. Holding a photograph in my hand, One of the two of us as girls, matching dresses, wide-eyed and smiling. I placed it carefully on her front porch. I left no note. There was no demand, no plea, no expectation. My gesture was a final acknowledgement of the past and a recognition that some connections could no longer be salvaged through words alone. I lingered in my car for a moment, observing her through the front window. She noticed, yet she did not come out. Her silence remained, and for the first time, it did not wound me. It merely confirmed a truth I had long suspected. The sun was beginning its descent when I returned to my yacht, the quiet one. Docked along Lake Michigan's shoreline, its polished deck reflected the fading light, as if echoing the serenity I now felt within. I had called a few close colleagues to share a modest gathering, but the evening was contemplative rather than celebratory. Glasses of chilled white wine rested on the teak tables, the gentle lapping of water against the hull providing a rhythmic backdrop. I raised my glass, looking out over the lake's rippling surface. To every story they tried to write without me in it, I said quietly, voice steady but heartfelt. I'm the author now. The conversation with my guests was warm, reflective, and free from pretense. For once, I did not need to justify my presence, my accomplishments, or my history. Recognition had been granted, not because of spectacle, but because truth, diligently documented and courageously presented, prevails. I noticed Miles quietly observing, a subtle smile acknowledging the silent work we had accomplished together. His loyalty had never faltered, and in this space, it felt profoundly grounding. As the evening waned, I found myself alone on the upper deck, the lake stretching infinitely before me. The railing felt solid beneath my hands, a tactile reminder of the battles I had endured. My fingers traced along the polished wood, pausing where Brant's careless scorn had once landed, leaving figurative and literal marks. I allowed a small, introspective smile. It doesn't hurt anymore, I murmured to myself, but it remembers. The memory was no longer a source of shame, but a scar that testified to resilience, a personal emblem of endurance and eventual empowerment. Night deepened, and the city lights of Chicago twinkled distantly across the water. I leaned against the railing, inhaling the crisp autumn air, letting it fill every part of me with quiet satisfaction. Justice had been served. Brant's reputation lay in tatters. His attempts to undermine me had failed spectacularly. Yet I understood that some outcomes were imperfect. Isolde's absence and the fractured bond between us could not be restored through legal victory or public acclaim. Healing, I realized, was less about erasing scars and more about carrying them gracefully, with awareness and dignity. I let the wind tousle my hair as I contemplated the road ahead. My company was thriving once again, my reputation untarnished in the eyes of colleagues and the public. But more importantly, I had reclaimed my narrative, the story of my life, from those who had sought to diminish it. In that moment, the lake reflected not just the sunset, but a profound sense of self-possession. Peace, perhaps, would never be complete. Some scars would never fully fade. Yet I knew the value lay in moving forward, empowered by the knowledge that I had acted with integrity, strategy, and unflinching resolve. I stood for a long while, letting the lake's serenity embed itself within me, the yacht's gentle sway beneath my feet, grounding each thought. I was free, in a way I had never been before, not from the past, nor from pain, but from the invisibility that had haunted me for decades. Every lesson, every calculated silence, every carefully documented moment had culminated here. And I would carry it forward, fully aware, fully present, fully authoring the life I chose to lead. You can forgive people, I whispered to the night sky. But sometimes the healing is in walking away, not in waiting for them to change. With that, I allowed myself a final deep breath, savoring the balance between triumph and reflection, knowing that scars do not define us. They remind us we have endured, and that strength can be found even in absence, silence, and the quiet aftermath of justice. As we close this story, remember that standing up for yourself isn't just about winning against others, it's about reclaiming your own voice and dignity. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones fought quietly, with patience and strategy. What would you do if someone tried to erase your worth? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of resilience, justice, and unexpected empowerment.